Greetings. I am Reverend William Coleman, the CBC Spouse Chair and spouse of Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman from the 12th Congressional District in New Jersey. Thank you for joining us for the CBC Spouses Essay Contest Issue Forum. Today, we will hear the thoughts from the top 3 students who were selected from more than 200 applicants as they talk about what the Supreme Court's decisions around affirmative action and college admissions means to them. Thank you to our sponsor, Microsoft, for investing in the next generation of leaders. Each student will receive a laptop from our sponsor. Now let me share the history of the CBC spouses. The Congressional Black Caucus spouses are comprised of wives and husbands of the African American members of the United States Congress. The CBC Spouses Organization is a component of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Incorporated, a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization committed to public policy, research, and leadership development. For almost 50 years, the spouses have collaborated with CBCF and partner sponsors to establish educational and training opportunities for high school and college students. The spouses, through the CBCF, have awarded more than $10 million in scholarships to deserving students throughout the nation. The CBCF seeks to advance the global Black community by developing leaders, informing policy, and educating the public. The CBCF brings together subject experts, industry leaders, elected officials, students, and concerned citizens to engage in meaningful dialogue and incite positive change. Learn more about the CBCF through its website, www.cbcfinc.org. Now, let's talk about these outstanding young people that are here today. Almost 200 students responded through their essays to the following written prompts. The Supreme Court struck down race-conscious admissions for college students as a factor of consideration. Please base your essay on any of the 4 questions. Number 1, do you agree with the Supreme Court's decisions to strike down race-based admissions? Why or why not? Number 2, will the Supreme Court decision affect your choice of applying for colleges? Why or why not? 3, do the Supreme Court decision draw you closer to applying at HBCUs, and or were you including HBCUs in your overall application process, regardless of the Supreme Court decision? Please explain your thought process in this decision. And 4, do you believe that the colleges and universities can be diverse without affirmative action plans? Why or why not? To hear the student responses and discussions on this topic, I am handing the program over to Dr. Tiffany McMillan Mfume, CBC spouse and wife of Representative Mfume from Baltimore, Maryland.
Thank you, Reverend Coleman. I'm excited to hear from our panel. First, we have Kennedy Mitchell-Egbo, first place recipient from California, and he's represented by Senator LaFonza Butler. Kennedy is a freshman at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. Our second place recipient is Lauren Beals, who is a freshman at the University of Nevada at Las Vegas and represented by Stephen Hortzford. Our third place recipient is Jerea Branch from Representative Terry Sewell's district in Alabama. She's a high school senior at Hillcrest High School. Welcome to all 3 of you and congratulations. Let's get started with the questions that you responded to in your essay, and feel free to jump in as we have this conversation with any comment at any time. We'll start with you, Kennedy. Do you agree with the Supreme Court's decision to strike down race-based admissions? And tell us why or why not.
Thank you to the CBC spouses for having me on. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity and naming me as the first place for the essay contest. I really appreciate that. And to answer your question, Dr. Mfume, no, I do not agree with the Supreme Court's decision to strike down race-based admissions due to the fact that Blacks are disproportionately poor, as they make up only 13.1% of the U.S. population, yet they make up 20.1% of the poverty population in the U.S.
Okay, what about you, Lauren?
I would like to thank everybody for having me as well. Thank you so much to the CBC spouses. I appreciate this opportunity. And I will admit that I initially disagreed with this decision, especially considering my grandfather benefited from affirmative action, and he became the first African American to graduate from UCLA's graduate biology program and be admitted into their biology PhD program. Although, after learning that this legislation only eliminates the ability of colleges to consider race in admissions, I came to agree with this decision because it allows colleges to admit qualified applicants regardless of race, allowing the greater issues of poverty and a lack of access to education within the African American communities through data collected through the National Institute of Health to be addressed. Hopefully, this decision encourages legislation to combat this, and more minorities are qualified to apply to and succeed at elite schools, such as the ones targeted in the case in question.
Great, Lauren, thank you. Jerea, what do you feel about this decision?
Thank you all for having me, and thank you for letting me get the award. And I do agree with the Supreme Court's decision because in the previous case, Shaw v. Reno, they decided that a decision based on race is unconstitutional. So they're upholding their decision then and promoting fairness and equality.
So when you learned about this decision by the Supreme Court, how did that affect your decision for college or university? Did it change the colleges that you applied for, or did you stay on track in terms of where you had planned to apply from the beginning?
I actually stayed on track as far as my college journey, just for the sole fact that I went to a school in a very nice neighborhood. It was a private school, so I didn't have to deal with certain communal constraints when looking at college and looking at higher education. But again, that goes back to the point of when dealing with poverty and outside circumstances, it's extremely hard to get into these elite institutions. And for others, I could see why maybe they would have to reconsider what they were doing for college just based off the sole fact that they're disproportionately represented and unfairly treated when looking at educational institutions.
I'm excited about listening to all three of you, but I'm a Baptist preacher and I can't keep my mouth shut. So let me just say that I read an article by Forbes who kind of agreed with you, Kennedy. Forbes magazine wrote an article about what the end of affirmative action means for colleges and universities. And I do ask that the three of you take a look at that. I'm sorry, Dr. Mfume, you may continue.
Sure. Let's see if Jerea, did you have any change in how you approached your college application? I know you're still in high school, so you're still working through this, and then we'll hear from Lauren and what her experience has been.
No, because a decision based on race is not actually captured in individual's merit. If left to the college admissions, a race-based admission will benefit one race over another, not promoting equality and fairness for other ethnicities.
And I think you're right, because that was mentioned as related to the Asian population. You're absolutely correct. This article said that race can no longer be used in college admissions. Earlier this morning, the Supreme Court announced a pair of rulings reversing the longstanding higher education practice of affirmative action and consider of race in October. The decision would trigger the biggest change to the college admission enrollment process. Just want to put that out there to you. I appreciate what you're saying. And I've picked up on the last point that you said, other ethnic groups. So thank you.
Okay, Lauren, what do you think in terms of your personal journey?
I already knew what schools I wanted to apply to, some of which since I was 9 years old, and I was not going to let this decision affect my choices, especially considering the fact that equal rights legislation and anti-discrimination laws have been passed since my grandfather's time almost 50 years ago. This being said, I applied to public and private colleges alike, and I am proud to say that I am on track to graduate debt-free from the second most diverse public college in America.
Wow, congratulations, Lauren, especially on the debt-free part.
Thank you.
So, Wonderful. So tell me how you think this decision factors in as it pertains to historically Black colleges and universities. Did you all said that you mostly stayed on track with what you were going to do anyway, but do you know of any of your peers, or just from how people are discussing the decision, do you see a way that this would change how HBCUs are perceived or making that an option for students?
Well, I haven't heard much chatter necessarily about there being an increase in applications as far as going to HBCUs, but I do believe in the future it will become a hub for Black people who are seeking higher education, just for the sole fact of it feels like elite institutions may not look at us as well as they would look at our contemporaries who are white or of a different ethnic group. So I think that definitely down the line in the future, HBCUs will become more of an option for the African American community to take advantage of. And they have great programs, and they're just as good as the elite institutions, in my opinion.
Dr. Fume, something interesting, and I read today that MIT found already in their postings that the enrollment numbers are down for Latinos and African American students at these colleges. So we're seeing an impact. The decision will prevent colleges from considering a student race when reading application. It will also complicate the ability of colleges to use race during the recruitment process before a student applies, or in financial aid and scholarships after they are accepted. Just want to throw that out there. You didn't think I was going to let you get away with that, did you, Kennedy? It was good. I'm enjoying this discussion.
No, I think he's right. Both of you are. Kennedy, regarding the fact that we'll see this more and more pronounced as the years go forward, because we're just really at the end of the first recruitment cycle since the law was changed. And as Reverend Coleman said, MIT is one of the first to report publicly of the elite institutions, how their data and demographics have changed. But as we are all required to report to the National Center for Education Statistics and through the IPEDS program, we will all have this data because our data is public as far as the demographics of enrolling freshmen. So we'll have this data. It's due by October 15th. And so everyone has got to begin the reporting process. And so by the time we come back next year for ALC, we'll have this data, and maybe we can have a discussion about what it looks like a year down the road. Did you all have a comment about HBCUs, Jerea or Lauren?
On my peers, since, this is the prime time to talk about colleges and everything for seniors, they have said that this decision has made them go towards HBCUs, actually, because they want to have a sense of community and a home away from home.
Mm-hmm.
In regard to what I have heard about this, I actually have spoken with students at Harvard and Harvey Mudd who were worried about this legislation, but I spoke to my college counselor about it, and he has years of experience in this field. And he stated that the elite schools targeted in this case are so selective that this decision would have no effect on my undergraduate admission. And also, to answer the other question about HBCUs, I was initially interested in applying to them, but upon learning about their history of combating predominantly white institutions, I was deterred from these universities because they appear to encourage segregation by definition. And I am aware that they offer diversity scholarships, and one of my Caucasian friends was accepted into an HBCU. But I believe that these schools, like their predominantly white counterparts, should focus on fostering diversity instead of racial branding, especially in light of this decision.
So this question pops up: how colleges and universities will be impacted. We expect the decision to have a major impact on colleges and universities, including a drop in Black, Hispanic, and Native enrollment, fewer students of color in their lead funnels, increased operational complexity. So I really enjoy. I am having a fun time listening to the three of you, because you bring a diverse and a good cross section for our listeners and those who are observing to see what's going on in this country right now and how it can affect or will affect our population going forward.
Yeah, and I do want to say to Lauren's point that historically Black colleges and universities, the 107 that are in existence, are just that. We are historically Black, but it does not mean that we don't recruit other races, ethnicities, international students. We just have become branded in recent years as a place where Black students feel comfortable and there's a sense of community. But historically, we were the only option, right? We did not start off, we are the product of segregation, right? But it wasn't us trying to be segregated. It's us creating an opportunity for ourselves when we were not able and considered for admission to the majority, predominantly white institutions. But outside of the historical significance of HBCUs, we love diversity, and we want to see all students join us at HBCUs. I'm a graduate of Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland, and I have a great connection to that university through family. But I want to say that I don't know any HBCU that is not trying to expand their base and find that more students find the colleges and universities appealing. In Maryland, just so you know, we had a historic court case as well with program duplication. What we found is that if at the public institutions, if our traditionally white counterparts have the same program or create the same program that we have, white students are more likely to gravitate to that program. So what we said is if you let some HBCUs have exclusive programs that aren't offered, let's say, at a college park in Maryland, then to your point, Lauren, white students will want to come to us because we're the only program in that field. So we are trying not to be segregated. So if our programs aren't duplicated, there's not a white option and a Black option. It's just the place where you go. In our case, in the state of Maryland, let's say for cybersecurity, it's, here in Maryland, we have the University of Maryland Eastern Shore that has a agriculture program. They're the only one. It's a historically Black college. So white or Black, that's where you can go to major in agriculture. They have a aviation program that is, if you want to be a pilot, right, and train, that's the only program public in the state of Maryland where you can do that. So the more that we have programs that no matter where you land in terms of race or ethnicity, this is the best option for you, then we can kind of push back on that segregation and just see ourselves as competitive institutions.
I want to make 2 points really quick. I'm sorry to.
No, go right ahead, Kennedy.
Okay. To your point, though, Dr. Mfume, I think that saying that HBCUs are segregated is not necessarily fair, just for the sole fact that we don't know how many white counterparts are actually applying to the HBCUs as well. Because on the flip side of that, I kind of almost think that people definitely like to frown upon institutions like HBCUs because they think that PWIs are better, and they may consider HBCUs to be more crude. But I definitely think that we'd have to do a study and see the admissions rate as far as white counterparts when applying to HBCUs to really, determine if it's segregated or not. And I also wanted to go back to Reverend Coleman's point about the MIT study. Yes, I agree with you that as of right now, affirmative action is definitely affecting students of color as far as admission rates. But in terms of HBCUs, I still don't think HBCUs have seen a rise in applications per se in the next year or so. But I think down the line in the future, it will actually increase how many applicants there are. So I think that's definitely something to look out for and be excited for if you're an HBCU.
Well, we're about time to wrap up our discussion. It's been so many great points that have been made. I do want to have a final round with a question of how you see systematic racism presenting itself, whether it's in college admissions or in the workplace. Do you think Black people will always be at a disadvantage, or do you think we're getting close to having an equal playing field, a leveled playing field, and equal opportunity, regardless of race and ethnicity? So I'll start with Lauren on this one.
Just to clarify, you're asking whether I think that colleges. Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. I'm asking in general, when you think about the Supreme Court decision, do you feel that the forms of systemic racism that have existed, when we talk about segregation, for example, and why we even have affirmative action in HBCUs, do you think we're getting closer to not needing anything to level out or to manage systemic racism? Do you think we're getting to a point where Black people, people of African descent here in America, will not need to experience any level of racism? Do you think we're close to that, or do you think we'll always need to have, I guess, safeguards and to ensure equity and fairness when it comes to race in education, in our workplace, in our communities?
Yes, I do agree that, or I do believe that this decision will bring us closer to, I guess you could say, removing the barriers of systemic racism. As I stated in my first point, this decision would eliminate race-based discrimination, but it still won't eliminate the desire for these elite schools to become diverse. And a reason why they're not diverse is because they do not have qualified applicants that are marginalized as well. And according to a study from the National Institute of Health, a lot of these students are not qualified because they tend to have lower quality education and attend lower quality schools. And I think that this decision would bring more attention to that, and it has brought more attention to that from my perspective. And so to answer your question, I think that, yes, I do think that systemic racism is close to an end. And I do think that in the future, this decision will lead to African Americans not having to experience that.
One quick question for all three as you wrap him up. Have any of you read the 2025 project and your thoughts of diversity and equity? That's a big thing right now across this country. So I just want you to keep that in mind as you give us your ending thoughts. Okay.
Okay, Kennedy, let's hear from you.
I just want to go to Lauren's point about a lower quality education. I think that is a sign of systemic racism, actually. I think that's definitely a sign of the fact that one race has to deal with poor education, and one race has to deal with over-policing and different types of things to disenfranchise us. I think systemic racism only ends when we as a community attain generational wealth. And I think that's the thing that we need the most is money to get out of this racism that is in our institutions. And I think it starts with the crack epidemic and what happened with the war on drugs that kind of really fostered an environment that has put us in turmoil as a community as of right now. So I don't think systemic racism ends anytime soon until our community comes together and rallies to get some money and really improve our education.
Okay, Jerea.
I do think there will have to be rules in place to stop racism from happening as frequently, but there will still be racism because we're all human and we can't control how others see us, but we can control how we see ourselves. And we need to change our mindset and stop really conforming to the image that society has placed on us. Because, for example, a couple of years ago, two business owners both set up like a restaurant on opposite sides in the same town, but on opposite sides of the road. And one was Black and the other was white. However, many people went to the right restaurant, including our fellow African Americans, because they all believed that the Black man just wouldn't do a great job at managing the restaurant and also poor hygiene. And so we, as a whole, we just look down on our own race instead of supporting each other. We're looking down, we're stereotyping each other based on how society sees us. And so we have to control first how we see ourselves to truly make Black people have an advantage.
What a great place for us to wrap up in terms of how we see ourselves being more important than how we are seen and how we can control what we think about ourselves. And a lot of times we do think about racism as Black versus white or white versus Black, but you nailed it, Jerea, that sometimes we're thinking poorly of each other within our own race. And so we can address that and begin to really strengthen our communities by being excellent in all that we do. And I'm so excited because the three of you, Kennedy, Lauren, Jerea, you represent Black excellence. We're so excited for your essays. Thank you for participating. Thank you for submitting. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. We're very proud of you. And as I have said to you all offline, I feel like I'll be voting for one of the three of you in an election sometime soon. So I will turn things back over to Reverend Coleman to close out our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fume. And thank you all for your thoughtful insights and perspectives. I do encourage all three of you to pull up on your computer Project 2025 and please read it and digest it and understand diversity and equity. Again, we wish you much success as you go through college and become future leaders. And to our audience, we invite you to visit the CBCF website at www.cbcfinc.org to learn more about the foundation, its research and outreach. Thank you for joining us.